Hello and welcome to our second reflection as we journey with the Gospels. Today's reflection is called Going On in Faith and Trust. Well, throughout a large part of my ministry as a priest up and down the land, I've spent a significant amount of time working by the sea, from Sussex to Cornwall, and now on the most wonderful Jurassic coast here in Weymouth. I'm very aware of the sea. Many of you will feel the same. We know both its beauty and its danger, its capacity to be a source of pleasure and a place of tragedy. In ancient mythology, the sea is a symbol of chaos. So when we read in the Genesis story of creation, God draws the land out of the sea. He's beginning that work of bringing order out of chaos, which will find its fulfillment when chaos is no more. The picture painted for us at the end of the Bible in the book of the Revelation of St. John the Divine is the new heaven and new earth, where there will be no more sea. Well, living as we do between these two events, we live in a world where order and chaos exist alongside each other. I've been conscious over the last few months that all we have read about in the newspapers and seen on the news is bad news around the pandemic. Chaos. So much so that we forget the many good things which are going on and the signs that despite everything, God's creative purposes are at work. And that work is that we, with all creation, might reveal his glory. I look at our churches standing in all the villages and towns of our land, many for centuries, and there by the grace of God, these places are there because people over the centuries have cared enough and repaired their walls, reslated the roofs, and kept the gutters clean. We are used to this frontier work on our buildings against the chaos of the world's natural elements. This is a work of prayer, holding back the return of chaos and supporting the ongoing creative work of God to bring order out of confusion. If we cannot always see the results of our praying, neither can we know what would have happened if we had not prayed. Well, with this in mind, I want us to think about what it means to journey on in faith and trust, and consider two incidents in the Gospels. You will know them both: the stilling of the storm and Jesus walking on water. When we think about faith, no one explanation is adequate because there are many. Faith has been defined as the capacity to live with doubt. Often we think that faith and doubt are incompatible. One opposite to faith is sight. If we can see the way ahead, we don't need faith. Doubt has even been defined as faith in two minds. That is, faith still making up its mind about something. Another opposite to faith is fear. Fear stops us from using the faith we have. Do not be afraid is a reassuring encouragement found in the Gospels. Perfect love casts out fear. So the more we can trust in God's love, the more faith we shall discover we have. Faith is the assurance of things hoped for. It is living as though the promises of God have already come true, and on the way discovering that indeed they have. Well, let's have our Bible reading today now, our first one. As you hear it, I wonder if you see how it connects with what we have just heard about faith and remembering our thoughts about the sea as a symbol of chaos. On that day, when evening had come, he said to them, "Let us go across to the other side." And leaving the crowd behind, they took him with them in the boat, just as he was. It was a lovely, calm evening on the lake. Other boats were with him. And then a great gale arose, and the waves beat into the boat, so that the boat was already being swamped. But Jesus was in the stern, asleep on the cushion. And they woke him up and said to him, "Teacher, do you not care that we are perishing?" And he woke up, and he rebuked the wind, and he said to the sea, "Peace, be still." Then the wind ceased, and there was a dead calm. And he said to them, "Why are you afraid? Have you still no faith?" And they were filled with great awe and said to one another, "Who then is this, that even the wind and the sea obey?" Well, you will have heard that story many times, I'm sure, over the years. When we read a passage from the Bible, we come to it through the background of our own culture, religious and secular. From early times, a ship was used in Christian art to depict the church. Like the Ark of Noah, the church was an ark carrying people to salvation. But it could seem to be a very small boat with every stormy sea threatening to overcome it. Opposition and persecution were constant companions, while problems and divisions within thwarted its progress. At times, it seemed that God was asleep and did not care. But the telling of the storm story we've just heard says that God is not indifferent to what was happening to his people. He hears their cry and will come to their aid. And in the end, the peace which Jesus brings is as deep as the storm was great. I wonder how this story might speak to you and me as Christians today. Does it help you to understand your calling as the people of God? Well, let's have another Bible reading now. Immediately, he made the disciples get into the boat and go on ahead to the other side, while he dismissed the crowds. And after he had dismissed the crowds, he went up the mountain by himself to pray. When evening came, he was there alone, but by this time the boat, battered by the waves, was far from land, for the wind was against them. And early in the morning, he came walking towards them on the lake. But when the disciples saw him walking on the lake, they were terrified, saying, "It is a ghost." And they cried out in fear. But immediately Jesus spoke to them and said, "Take heart, it is I. Do not be afraid." Peter answered him, "Lord, if it is you, command me to come to you on the water." And Jesus said, "Come." So Peter got out of the boat and started walking on the water, and came towards Jesus. But when he noticed the strong wind, he became frightened and started to sink. And he cried out, "Lord, save me." And Jesus immediately reached out his hand and caught him, saying to him, "You of little faith, why did you doubt?" When they got into the boat, the wind ceased, and those in the boat worshipped him, saying, "Truly, you are the Son of God." Well, I wonder what you think links this passage to the other passage we heard earlier. Our first answer will surely be it teaches about faith. As we hear of Peter's experience, I wonder if it reminds you of the incident in your life or in the life of the church. It certainly does me. So as we draw the themes of these two stories together, we may like to think about the following. Both stories today had a lot about fear in them. Perhaps rather than asking what is faith, we should be asking what is fear. It's not always easy to say of what we're afraid, but it holds us back from trusting. As we ask with the disciples, who can this be? Who does all these things? And as we come to our own answers about how we see and know Jesus, the possibilities for faith may grow, and in turn, the church may grow. So back to our journey. We can discover the faith we have if we set out on the journey and put it to good use. There are some boat owners who spend so much time getting their vessels ready that they miss the sailing season and never leave the safety of the harbour to cross the sea and risk the storms. And maybe there are Christians and churches like this too. Well, as we draw to a close this week's reflection, I invite you now to join in a short moment of prayer. And until next week, I wish you God's blessing.